Right now, there is a Royal Marines commando who is being hounded by the Ministry of Defence and the Counter-Terror Police. Why? Well, because he dared to start a petition against DEI hiring practices for the Royal Marines training and selection. But before the Ministry of Defence embarked on this whole process and witch hunt against him, they probably didn't realise that he had a brother who was a YouTuber with a big platform. And that brother has made a video exposing all of this.
I've been a YouTuber for 5 years, and in that time, I've never once gone into politics because as a YouTuber, it's not really my responsibility, or I don't feel like it's my responsibility to teach you what you should believe and what political opinions you should have. However, the British government is currently trying to slander, discredit, and defame my little brother, who is a Royal Marine Commando, simply for opposing something that he felt personally would result in the death of Marines. My little brother expressed some concerns over dangerous DEI policies within a corps of Royal Marines, and he made a petition to express those concerns. 1,000 Royal Marine Commandos signed that petition within 24 hours, and then the petition was taken down, and the chain of command circulated messages saying that it was Russian disinformation. It wasn't Russian disinformation, it was my little brother and 1,000 Royal Marine Commandos. So what did the Ministry of Defence decide to do? Well, instead of addressing the problem that all of these Royal Marines Commandos had signed up for, instead what they did is they started a witch hunt to try and locate the individual that started this petition so that they could make their life hell. One of the ways they did that was Marines were literally taken into bright lit rooms and interrogated to try and give up one of their brothers. And yet guess what? Nobody gave him up, because the bootnecks have got principle, something the chain of command could take a lesson from. Now, after weeks of intimidation and threats, my little brother began to feel bad for his friends, for the guys around him who were all being threatened and intimidated by the Ministry of Defence. And so he went to his chain of command, put his hand up and said, "It was me that started the petition." And so what did they do? Well, they flew him down to the main Ministry of Defence building in London on the other side of the country and interrogated him, where they threatened him, his career, and his family. Well, guess what? I'm his family, and I'm gonna shine a light on your total abuse of power, you shameful, pitiful, weak cowards. Now, after his first interrogation was over, he then went on holiday with his wife to decompress. But guess what happens next? He then arrives back into the United Kingdom, where on arrival, there's 5 police officers waiting for specifically him. He's then dragged into another interrogation room, this time under the Section 7 Terrorism Act.
Already, there is a lot that I want to talk about, and I'm going to, but I just want to rewind for a second and go all the way back to that petition. Let me put in a clip of the young Marine himself explaining what the petition was all about.
I made a survey about a particular issue that Marines are concerned about. That particular issue is that we believe that we have the high standards that we keep, and the high standards that we keep for a very important reason, which is to prevent Marines from being killed in dangerous situations when we go to war. And we've been told we will go to war very soon. We are concerned that those high standards are being dropped, and selectively dropped for political reasons, with the bespoke intention of forcing women through Royal Marines training for a political victory lap.
So the short version of this story, and it is the short version because that video alone is 32 minutes long, you should go and check it out by the way, but the short version of this story is that this young Marine and many of his fellow soldiers believes that female recruits at Lympstone are being given an easy ride. They are being treated with undue leniency in an attempt to just get them to pass the course because that will be some kind of political victory. Now, I don't really understand exactly how that would be a political victory to any specific party. But I think if you've got this sort of new age feminist mindset where the only value that a woman seems to be able to have is when she's able to do man things, then I guess, sure, then maybe it is some kind of political victory. I don't believe that. I think there are things that men can do that women cannot, and I think there are things that women can do that men cannot. And that's the kind of diversity that I actually am willing to celebrate. Anyway, I don't know if this is actually happening, and actually, frankly, neither do you. I've never been to Lympstone to train. I'm not part of the current training team there. When I was in the army, not the Marines, but when I was in the army, women were not permitted to join the Marines anyway. I really don't know if this is taking place. And in fact, the only people who do are probably Marines who are currently, or recruits who are currently there, and the Marines who are on the training staff. But what I will say is this. If you have hundreds, if not thousands, of Royal Marines who are concerned by this, then the chain of command probably should pay attention to it. I can imagine that some people are going to want to criticise this young Royal Marine on the grounds that he should just stay out of politics. And actually there is some truth to that. Officers and soldiers for the most part should stay out of politics. But that principle only applies up to a certain point. And the point at which it no longer applies is when you think that the politics in question are going to directly affect your operational capability and safety. And that's clearly what this young Royal Marine is concerned about. He's imagining in his head a young 5'5" woman, athletic, very fit, strong for her size, but fails a few tests at Lympstone, is still passed, and now all of a sudden she finds herself in the middle of a firefight with a 6'6" sergeant who becomes a casualty. He's built like Jack Reacher, and she has to casualty drag him 800 metres back to safety. Both of those people have now got a really big problem on their hands because she can't do it, and well, that is the problem, okay? I can understand that, and if you don't think that soldiers should ever be involved in politics, let me give you this as a thought experiment. Imagine that the British Army decided, you know what, we can save a little bit of money here if we order all of our ammunition from Temu. So they do that. They bulk order 1 million rounds of 5.56 from Temu. And the soldiers, when they're using this ammunition, realise that actually they get 10 stoppages for every 30 round magazine they fire. The ammunition is no good. Would you expect those soldiers and officers to stay silent because they should stay out of politics? No, you wouldn't, because they can't go to battle being that underprepared and with kit that is going to malfunction like that. So I think everyone accepts that there are times, particularly around critical safety issues, that soldiers and officers are going to have to stand up and have a say against political matters. And this is probably one of them. Another point that I want to talk about in this video, and probably the most important takeaway from the entire story, is about how the police are abusing the UK Terrorism Act of 2000. And let me explain to you how they're doing this. So this young Royal Marine, he's questioned by his chain of command at MOD main building, and then he goes away on holiday to Ayia Napa or Magaluf or wherever a young Marine goes to on holiday. He comes back and he arrives at the airport, and there are 5 police officers waiting for him. They detain him under UK Terrorism Act of 2000. And what this does is it gives the police a whole series of additional powers. So they can hold you for 48 hours without any right to a lawyer. So no, you don't get to speak to a lawyer. You have no right to remain silent, so you do have to answer every single question. And if you don't, that is an offence in and of itself. You have to give them all of your devices, so your laptop, your phone, iPad, whatever it might be, camera, things like that. And you have to give them all of the passwords and the pins so that they can get into all of it. Again, if you don't do that, then that is an offence in and of itself, very easy to prove because you simply haven't given them the access, and you can go to prison for that. Very, very serious stuff. You can see why the police might want to use these powers, particularly when they're trying to deal with someone who they think, you know, might be resistant a little bit to their authority. So they do it. They abuse it, and they did this to Tommy Robinson. They tried to get him in prison for 2 years, even though he said, I'm a journalist. I'm not giving you access to my phone because there's a lot of confidential sources on there that I don't want you to have access to. It's really bad, and we need to be very, very careful. We all understand why these laws exist, because in our heads we think, well, the police are going to use this to find people like Salman Abedi, for example, the Manchester Arena bomber. They're going to find him just in the nick of time. They're going to hold him, get access to all of his devices, question him, and prevent something terrible from happening. But really, and I'm sure the police are using these laws in that way some of the time, but really, often, they're using it against fairly ordinary citizens with some mildly right-wing views, and they're kind of using it as a bullying tool. It's really not healthy. I think one way to solve this would be after every incident of the UK Terrorism Act of 2000 being used by the police to detain or arrest someone, the police have to present that to an independent council of judges and say, this is why we did it. This is why we thought that the Terrorism Act was appropriate to arrest this person because we think that he might be involved in terrorism. And in that case, good luck going to a judge and saying, yeah, we did this to Tommy Robinson, for example, because we think he might be a terrorist. Nonsense. Nobody thinks that Tommy Robinson is a terrorist. I'm sure there's some people on the far left. I'm sure Nick Lowles probably thinks he is, but No sane person thinks he is. And no sane person thinks that a young Royal Marine is a terrorist, right? So good luck explaining that to a judge and trying to convince them that you're not just abusing your police powers.
Let's make this very, very clear. None of this would have ever happened if he just stayed quiet about that DEI policy. And so what happens next? What they're gonna do is they're gonna try and slander, defame, and discredit him to make him look like a far-right radical, instead of addressing the concerns of 1,000 Royal Marines in a one-day period. Sure, the reason they're trying to do this is because they're going to make an example of him. Because if they crucify him, then nobody will ever again have the courage to stand up and resist this ridiculous political brain rot.
What Plastic Scott is describing here is absolutely true, and it isn't unique to this case at all. The British state does this all the time, and I like to think of it in this way. If we shoot the messenger, we can just ignore the message. And I come back to Tommy Robinson because he's such a prominent example of exactly this. For a long time, 15 years ago, he was talking about grooming gangs and things like that, very sensitive topics. And a lot of people were listening to that message. Wow, that was close. A lot of Englishmen were listening to that message and taking it very seriously. And the state was worried. But instead of addressing the message, which would have been a very difficult thing to do because it would have meant accepting that some very bad things have been done to this country and there are certain groups who are more responsible than others, instead of addressing that, they thought, we could do that. We could look at the problems underlying why people are so upset, or we could just shoot the messenger. We could just get rid of Tommy Robinson. And so that's what they did. They sent police to raid his house. They ran him up on some, it probably wasn't bogus, but they ran him up on some spurious mortgage fraud case about his nephew who'd borrowed some money, misdeclared his income, but had paid back the entire mortgage already. Nobody was out of pocket. And somehow they got Tommy Robinson to go to jail for 2 years. And that was it. They shot the messenger and they got rid of the message that way. Now they can just ignore it. Of course, eventually it just keeps coming back and back and back. It's a really short-sighted option. It doesn't really work. It's short-termerism, but that's the way the state thinks anyway. If we just get rid of the messenger, we can ignore the message. Very, very dangerous stuff. And that's what they're trying to do here with this guy. They don't want to deal with the underlying problem that actually, yeah, maybe we are being kind of crazy by trying to force DEI into, elite fighting units. Maybe that isn't actually a good idea after all. But instead of actually addressing that, we could just get rid of this one guy, make a really harsh example out of him, and nobody else is going to kick up a fuss ever again. It's really not healthy. It's not healthy at all. It's kind of a Soviet style of running your country. Not good. Let me wrap this video up by giving some advice to the chain of command for this young Royal Marine. And you can choose to listen to me or not. I'm a civvy. I can say whatever I want. You don't have to take it on board. But here goes. One of three things is absolutely true. You either believe him, you don't believe him, or you're really not sure if he has a point about all of this. But what is absolutely certain, no matter whether you believe him or not, is that coming down on this young Royal Marine like a ton of bricks is the wrong approach. I absolutely guarantee you that this is the wrong approach. And let me explain why. Let's assume, for example, that you don't believe him. You think he's totally wrong about all of this. Okay, well, here's the problem for you. The rest of the young Royal Marines probably agree with him. They believe him. And so here's what happens if you come down on him like a ton of bricks and you kick him out of the Royal Marines and you ruin his career, maybe even worse. God knows what you've got in store for this guy. You do that, and all of those other young Royal Marines are going to feel completely disempowered, disenfranchised. They will no longer trust the chain of command. They will never come to you with any problems again in the future. Many of them will simply leave out of protest or just a feeling of despair. Like, why would I go to war and follow the orders of my OC when my OC was totally wrong about this and just got rid of that guy and he was a great bloke, I've known him for years? That's the mindset that they're going to have. So even if you think he's totally wrong, completely destroying his life is not a good solution. What you then need to do is try and convince the rest of the troops that he is wrong, whilst also not ruining this guy's life, because you can't kick him out of the Marines and get rid of him and then try and convince the rest of the troops that you were right all along. They'll never believe you because of what they've seen you do. They'll just assume that you did that to cover up the truth, get rid of him who created the petition, and now you're just going on like a damage control kind of run. It's not the right strategy. Let's assume that you don't know if he has a point or not. Maybe because you're his OC, right? And you haven't been at Lympstone for quite some time, and you don't know if what he's saying is true or not. But what you do know is that a lot of other Royal Marines believe it. Well, at this point, whether it's you or whether it's someone else, needs to go and investigate, needs to go and find out the truth. That's the only thing you can do with a bit of integrity. Go and work out if the things that he's talking about and describing are actually happening. And if you come to the conclusion that, yes, they are, then you're going to have to, unfortunately, stand up in front of the troops and say, yes, you were right, this is happening, but we've put a stop to it, it will never happen again. The troops will absolutely love and applaud that. You will win over their respect for eternity, right? That is a good thing, okay? And yes, some, I don't know, 4th or 5th stage feminist doesn't get their victory. Do you know what? They're never going to be a Marine anyway. Who cares? Right? You should be focused on and prioritised on the Royal Marines, making them the best possible fighting force that they can be, not on pleasing some 5th wave feminist in Westminster or whatever. Don't care, ignore it. That's not your concern. You have one concern, and that's looking after your troops. The alternative is you go there, you investigate, and it turns out it's all nonsense. Now, then you've got a kind of a difficult situation because you've got to go and prove to the troops that your investigation was thorough, you got to the bottom of it, and actually none of the female recruits were being given an easy time. Some will believe you, some will not. It is what it is. That's just what you're going to have to do. They will still respect you, I think, for actually listening to their concerns, doing an investigation, and they might not agree with your conclusions, but they will respect you at least a little bit more. And the third option is that you do believe this guy, and you are still planning to come down on him like a ton of bricks and ruin his life. And in that case, I don't think there needs to be that much more said. You shouldn't be an officer. If you think that this young lad has a point, that he is correct, and you are still willing to throw him under the bus because you think it's the politically correct thing to do, then you've kind of betrayed everything you took an oath for. You know, you're not looking after your soldiers. I don't know what the Royal Marines officer phrase is, but, you know, in the army, it's serve to lead, right? Well, at that point, you're not serving to lead. You're just clamping down on someone. You're throwing one of the people that you're meant to be serving under the bus. And that's a real problem. That's a real problem for you. But if you're willing to do that, I'm guessing you're also not really willing to listen to anything that I'm going to say anyway. You're not going to take a stand with this guy because you already don't have the morals and the balls to take a stand with him. You believe that what he's saying is probably true, but you're just going to throw him under the bus anyway. And I guess what I'm saying is you're a bit of a dick at that point. Anyway, those are my final thoughts. What a long video, a lot of rambling. Look, I've just ranted for 5 straight minutes. It's probably really terrible quality and people are going to get annoyed because I don't usually ramble. I usually sort of like to be quite concise in the way I talk through things, but not today, I guess. Anyway, I think it's because it's an issue that I feel quite passionately about, and it's something I can relate to and can talk about a little bit more freely, but then there is a lot of stops and starts and ums and ers. Anyway, whatever, I'm rambling even more, wasting even more of your time. So please do leave a like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell icon, all of those good things if you want to. I dread to think how long this video is. If you made it all this way, thank you very much. I really do appreciate that. And yeah, I have to get this dog who is struggling, I think, in the heat back to the house. Might let her jump in the river on the way. And I'll see you till the next one. I'll see you on the next one.